CEBU Philippines, Southeast Asia's leaders convened in Cebu City in May 2026 for the 48th Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN Summit, a pivotal moment for the region amid global uncertainties and simmering intra-regional tensions. Hosted by the Philippines under the chairmanship of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the summit carried the official theme, Navigating Our Future Together, signaling the bloc's intent to face collective challenges with coordinated strategies. The gathering brought together all 10 ASEAN member states: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, alongside key dialogue partners at a time when energy market volatility, maritime security risks, and unresolved territorial disputes demanded urgent attention. Observers describe the summit as a balancing act between asserting ASEAN centrality and addressing both internal fractures and external pressures. President Marcos, as host and Chich, airframed ASEAN's 2026 priorities around three pillars: energy security, food security, and the welfare of Southeast Asia nationals globally. He emphasized that the summit would tackle both immediate crises and structural vulnerabilities while fostering a long-term vision under the ASEAN 2045 framework, which aims to strengthen regional integration, sustainability, and security over the coming decades. The work of ASEAN must continue, Marcos said, and added that this work must go forward not despite the challenges, but because the times demand our answers to those challenges. To complement these pillars, the Philippines pushed for operational measures on energy resilience, including a regional oil sharing framework under the ASEAN Petroleum Security Agreement. Delegates discussed cooperative mechanisms to cushion member states from global disruption stemming from conflict in the Middle East, such as the temporary closure of key maritime routes like the Strait of Hormuz. Food says security emerged as another key agenda item, with leaders recognizing vulnerabilities in staple supply chains exposed by climate-related disruptions and global market fluctuations. Discussions focused on coordinating regional agricultural production, stockpiles, and crisis management frameworks to protect ASEAN populations. A central highlight of the summit was the ongoing Cambodia-Thailand border dispute, which flared into violent confrontations in 2025 and left an uneasy ceasefire. Troops remain deployed along disputed land and maritime boundaries, including areas near culturally significant sites such as the Pre-Vihir Temple. On the sidelines of the summit, President Marcos convened a trilateral meeting with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet and Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul. The discussions aimed to reduce tensions and establish mechanisms for ongoing dialogue. Many subjects were covered, some agreements were reached, and ways forward were discussed. Marcos said, cheering cautious optimism that had eluded previous months. Both leaders reaffirmed the importance of maintaining open communication, exercising restraint, avoiding actions that may escalate tensions, and continuing efforts towards peaceful dialogue and constructive engagement. Thailand and Cambodia also agreed to task their foreign ministers with sustaining dialogue and building institutional channels to manage disputes, a step analysts noted as critical for lasting resolution. Previous confrontations in 2025, marked by artillery exchanges and troop deployments, had shattered decades of relatively muted dispute management, leaving both sides committed to confidence-building measures and engagement with ASEAN mechanisms to prevent future escalation. It is time for both countries to look forward and open a new chapter in relations, Anutin said, emphasizing that rebuilding trust requires sincerity, honesty, and shared commitment. Observers interpreted these remarks as reflective of ASEAN's broader desire to contain intra-regional conflict and uphold its principles of peaceful coexistence and non-interference. The summit also addressed the lingering crisis in Myanmar, where political turmoil continues to strain ASEAN relations. President Marcos urged Myanmar to grant the bloc's special envoy greater access, particularly to detained political figures, but progress remained limited. ASEAN continues to balance pressure with engagement, though internal complexities make a unified approach challenging. Reports highlighted that Myanmar's leadership had publicly criticized ASEAN for restrictive measures, reflecting the difficulties of constructive engagement under fragile political conditions. maritime security, particularly the South China Sea, remained a high priority topic. ASEAN has long negotiated a code of conduct, COC, with China, aiming to reduce incidents, promote freedom of navigation and overflight, and enforce a rules-based maritime framework. President Marcos Jr iterated his aspiration for progress on a binding COC by the end of 2026. Signaling ASEAN's commitment to regional security and legal order. The summit's chair's statement reaffirmed adherence to international law, peaceful dispute settlement, and a rules-based regional order, marking a formal codification of ASEAN's maritime priorities. Additional measures included discussions on a maritime cooperation declaration to enhance dialogue, law enforcement coordination, and freedom of navigation. Analysts highlighted Marcos' proposal for an ASEAN Maritime Center as a concrete step toward operational collaboration in contested waters. Global disruptions, particularly in energy markets, reinforced ASEAN's need for collective energy resilience. Delegates discussed fast-tracking a regional oil sharing agreement, increasing strategic reserves, and coordinating infrastructure investments. Food security discussions emphasized integration of agricultural supply chains, crisis mitigation, and climate adaptation strategies. Leaders recognize that nearly 700 million people in Southeast Asia depend on stable staple food supplies, making collective action crucial for social and political stability. Beyond the Philippines, other leaders contributed notable declarations. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto called for ASEAN to become a zone of peace, urging cooperation and restraint across the region. ASEAN reaffirmed its commitment to a nuclear-free Southeast Asia under the CNWFZ Treaty, underscoring engagement with nuclear-armed states on disarmament. The Asian Development Bank, ADB, pledged $30 billion by 2030 to support regional development initiatives. The summit also set the stage for the ASEAN Future Forum 2026, designed to sustain high-level dialogue on peace, prosperity, and people-centered development beyond the formal summit. Analysts view this as a mechanism to ensure continuity in ASEAN initiatives and to deepen cooperation in areas such as climate adaptation and energy and maritime security. Preparation for the summit involved extensive logistical and security coordination. Local authorities mobilized thousands of personnel to safeguard delegations and ensure uninterrupted proceedings. Despite these measures, the summit maintained an atmosphere of cautious optimism, balancing diplomatic achievements with sober recognition of ongoing challenges. As the 48th ASEAN Summit concluded, observers noted that Southeast Asia stands at a critical juncture. Efforts to stabilize the Cambodia-Thailand border, progress toward maritime rules, energy and food security coordination, and institutionalizing ministerial dialogues reflect ASEAN's commitment to constructive diplomacy over unilateral action or force. Under President Marcos's chairmanship, the bloc navigated these multifaceted issues with pragmatism and ambition, signaling that solidarity and cooperation remain central to ASEAN's identity, while lasting peace and integration will require years of susta. In each effort, Cebu marked a significant step toward reaffirming ASEAN's relevance amid a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. For many in the region, the hope is that dialogue, consensus, and shared vision will outweigh divisive forces, ushering Southeast Asia into a more stable, cooperative, and prosperous chapter.